Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and the Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Peter Watson.
And I'm David Steele. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. At this point, listeners, I am 1 minute and 27 seconds into my listening of last week's episode.
Gasp.
Chances are, by the time you're listening to this episode, I will have heard it. Bet Ross has heard it already. Ross and I have been not exactly racing, but it's I felt recently it's almost a competition between us to who can listen to it first. Which is quite amusing. So I'm sure he's beaten me today. Because, as I say, I'm only just at the bit when you're sort of explaining why we were doing the Road to First Issue Special. Of course, this week we're doing an issue of First Issue Special. We're doing issue 5, published, according to Mike's, on the 22nd of May, 1975. The 22nd of May in 1992. That was a Friday, and we did the chunk of our filming for our college video project when I was at college and stuff. Listeners, Peter is looking at me.
You say we, I wasn't involved in this, yes.
Well, those of us who were involved in it. Peter hasn't seen it, will he? Probably not. Who can say? Right, Peter, would you like to tell everyone about the cover to DC First Issue Special number 5?
I would be delighted. We have DC, the line of superstars, in the top left, with the banner going across, First Issue Special, 25 cents, number 5, August 32413, if anyone's interested in that number. Manhunter is the logo at the top. Now, it's an incredibly striking cover. On the left-hand side, we have a disembodied head. It looks like it's been nailed up on a cave wall by its hair. And it's horrible with big staring red eyes and big Jack Kirby-esque teeth, because this is a Jack Kirby comic, folks. We're in for a treat. And creeping up behind him is the Manhunter. Now, he looks like the Paul Kirk Manhunter with the red costume, with the blue trunks, the blue boots and gloves, and of course, that creepy silvery grey face mask. And he's got a yellow baton in his hand, and he's sneaking up on this head.
Yes.
But he's not going to surprise the head, because this disembodied head is saying, "We knew you'd come, Manhunter, sooner or later."
It's very striking. Worth pointing out, of course, that this issue 5 was homaged on the cover of issue 5 of the 1994 post-Zero Hour Manhunter series. I will put the covers on the socials side by side so you can remark to yourself how interesting that is. I still haven't read that series. You say it's very good, though.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's very Image comic style of the time.
Of course.
But it ties in a lot of stuff, and there are interesting things that happened in the Manhunter legacy in it, and I'll leave it at that. Because
I still need to read the 80s Manhunter series. I put a full set of that together a year or two ago.
It's fantastic.
And of course, that was, we should mention, because he's not here to tell us himself, that was the first comic that our pal Steve Higgins ever subscribed to.
And did he get the Manhunter mask that you were supposed to get when you subscribed?
He did. He did. I remember him telling me about it. And it was sort of cardboardy, and he was a little underwhelmed.
Aww.
I don't know if he still has it. Steve, if you're listening.
Oh yeah, stick it out.
Yeah,
please.
If you still got it, like, send us a photograph of A, yourself wearing it, and B, just it lying next to your copy of First Issue Special number 5, so we can put it in the socials.
Wear it with a red hoodie.
Yeah.
It'd be perfect. Zip it right up. Boom.
Steve, you own a red hoodie. Write in and let us know at the podcast. Anyway, our 2 podcasts. Anyway.
No man escapes the cardboard-faced Manhunter.
Indeed. Steve, that's a thought, actually. If you've still got it, next time you and Sarah are coming over to visit the UK, bring it with you so Peter can see it.
Wear it on the flight. That's what we recommend.
Wear it going through passport control. Anyway, this has been the Steve's Got the Manhunter Mask podcast. So, diving into issue 5 then, our opening splash page has a bit of captioning, as you would expect.
In the far and distant corners of this earth, there are fearsome criminals who hide in vain from justice, and a name which has haunted their kind through the ages. This is his story. This is the origin of Manhunter.
And interestingly, the opening splash panel is essentially a mirror image of the front cover. We can see a disembodied head with massive teeth and massive eyes. The top of its hair has been tied into a knot and it's been hung on his nail, and this cave wall is a candle burning in front of it. It's one detail that's not in the cover. And creeping into this cave is the red and blue outfitted Manhunter who Peter described. Very similar, as Pete says, to the Manhunter published by DC back in the day in the 40s. And as we go, we'll see how this ties into what we've talked about previously. But this Manhunter walking into the cave, and he's saying to himself, "The cave of the talking heads. I've found my quarry." The Cave of the Talking Heads. Is that where the band got the name from?
May well be.
David Byrne, if you're listening. And the disembodied head that we're all sick of hearing about replies,
We knew you'd come, Manhunter, sooner or later.
I should point out there's some text on the floor in front of Manhunter that reads Chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be a very 70s Jack story, and it'll be broken down into chapters and chunks. It'll be amazing. The splash panel for pages 2 and 3. Oh my goodness. Manhunter has walked further into the cave, and there, let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 9 disembodied heads, either hanging from the cave walls or balanced on sticks or just floating in the air, it seems. A caption reads,
We are in the last refuge of a murdering eccentric, a deranged but facile mind which is absorbed in masks and killing.
So maybe it's not a disembodied head, maybe they're masks. But let's try and describe them. There's a pink tinged one that looks so it's like the skin on someone's face is melted, and that one can be heard saying, Welcome, Manhunter. Have you come to join us on the wall of our cave? And there's another one with a very straggly beard and straggly purpley grey hair with almost looks like Alice Cooper eye makeup and missing teeth, and he says,
You've tracked us down, only to find death.
And there's one that looks like the sort of thing you might expect to see hanging on the wall in a voodoo scene in an old James Bond movie. And that proclaims,
Death. You will find death.
There are several others. There's one that looks like a lady who's been given a fright. There's one who's vicious looking, orange eyebrows and weird wide open eyes. There's another one that looks like a melted slab of brown chocolate. There's another one who, poking in from the top right hand side, looks like it could be the disembodied head of Dum Dum Dugan with his big straggly red moustache. But in the middle of the room, there's a massive, much bigger than any of the other ones, massive big floating green head. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Darkseid a little. And he's saying,
When this is over, your mask will hang here with ours.
Listeners, be assured we're putting this page on the social so you can see it is spectacular. Reading 70s Jack Kirby stuff has been an absolute delight this year. This is just amazing. And while all these heads are floating around and saying things, as Manhunter makes his way through the room, still clutching the golden baton that Pete described in the cover, we see in front of him, gosh, it kind of looks like one of those fairground machines where you put a penny in and a claw comes down and you try and pick up a toy. And inside this machine is a figure wearing a green cloak. He has a large bulbous pink head, 2 sort of bruise-coloured, is the only way I can think of it, large eyes, a wide mouth, and he seems to be operating some machinery inside this glass cabinet. It looks as though it's on feet, as if it can walk around, maybe some kind of mobile transport, and this figure says to Manhunter,
Listen to them, Manhunter. My heads never lie, even if they speak with recording tape. And the chopper doesn't lie.
A caption reads,
Suddenly,
and then amazingly, from the mouth of one of the disembodied heads, which looks like a kind of melted, I don't know, I want to say Tom Hingley from the Inspiral Carpets, but that's a really, really deep cut of a reference, and he's been on my mind because I went to see him at a show a couple of weeks ago. But this melted head with its dark hair, the mouth opens, and a whole big crackling burst of Kirby dot energy comes flying out with a sound effect, sending Manhunter recoiling backwards. And as the energy crackles around him, Manhunter says, You forgot my baton, Chopper. And he lifts his yellow stick with a wham sound effect. A burst of pink energy comes from that and fires outwards. A caption reads,
In one split second, the flame-throwing masks are put out of action.
Yeah, okay, so it was flames. That's interesting. Yes, we can see that the energy from the baton has struck the wall. Some of the heads have fallen down. Off camera, the Chopper, who apparently is this character in the weird glass case, he can be heard saying,
Bravo, Manhunter, but that weapon of yours won't help you here.
I'm still taking you in, Chopper. There are 10 dead people who are crying for justice. They want their killer brought to trial.
A charming thought, but it shall never happen. I'm too clever for my pursuers. Only you have managed to find me.
Great shot rounds out page 4 when we see over Manhunter's shoulder the Chopper, and he is grotesque. He has a touch of, there's a bit of a Star Trek alien face sort of thing to him. You can imagine him being an effective Star Trek or Lost in Space baddie. Manhunter replies, You know I always get my man, Chopper.
Like its spider counterpart, each homicidal mind spins endless death traps to claim its victims. It is the eternal risk of the adversary who dares to enter the deadly web. Above the Manhunter, death descends. Chopper's deadly invention.
The massive caption reads,
The Electric Head.
And another caption tells us we have reached
Chapter 2.
And indeed, as the captioning said, dropping from the ceiling on a piece of rope is a very Yes, it looks kind of like the head from a Celestial from an issue of the Eternals or something. This green metallic mask with lots of panels and bolts and weird lines attached to it drops down with a sound effect. It lands on Manhunter's head. A big burst of golden energy as it does so, and Chopper yells,
I warned you, now die. Fry, Manhunter. Not even your protective suit can withstand that voltage.
Yes, the sound effect continues. Manhunter struggles to remove the mask and he starts firing his baton. In the second panel, a couple of large pow, pow sound effects as the energy coming from the mask radiates and crackles all over the place. Caption for panel 3 of page 6.
Despite his peril, Manhunter's baton fires at Chopper's shield.
Yes, we can see the energy of the shield striking Chopper inside his little fairground machinery.
The chemical bullets penetrate and strike the target.
Inside the machine, we can see that Chopper has fallen down. His green cloak has ridden up, and we can see that he's wearing orange pinstripe trousers. Interesting. We also see that his mask has started to slip, revealing a very human-looking face inside, as he says,
He got me. Couldn't stop him. The paralysis shells. They'll put me out of action.
Yeah, and as the mask falls away, we see that he's got horrible yellow teeth, and again he's got a Tom Hingley from the Spiral Carpets haircut. Very uneven brown bowl cut. We can see underneath his green cloak, yes indeed, he's wearing a normal, contemporary I would say, pinstripe suit. We can see a shirt and tie by the looks of things. He reaches for a weird-looking axe thing that's on the floor in front of him, the final panel of page 6, thinking,
Getting dizzy, weak. I'll finish him before I become rigid and helpless. Chopper moves toward his intended victim.
Yes, Chopper steps out of the machinery, bearing an axe. We see Manhunter still struggling with the green mask that fell on him, energy crackling all over the place, as Chopper thinks,
He's managed to remove the electric head. He's open to attack.
Manhunter straightens up in the next panel saying, That was a bad jolt, Chopper, but it didn't do the job.
This will. I'll nail you while you're still shaken up.
And Chopper brings the axe above his head and yells,
You failed, Manhunter. Chopper is swift, but Manhunter is faster. He thrusts the electric head at the descending axe.
Yep, I see what you see caption, as Manhunter thrusts the mask forward, and it's the mask that the axe strikes, rather than Manhunter himself.
It is then that Chopper dies.
Oh, wow, okay. Yes, Chopper just basically seems to dissolve then in a massive release of energy, presumably because the mask has been struck. He goes out with a massive... The first panel of page 8, we can see Chopper stretched out on the ground, residual smoke and energy pouring from him. Manhunter also down on the ground, trying to balance himself on one hand and one knee. He regards the scene and says, Goodbye, Chopper. Fate writes its own scenario for master murderers. He straightens up, moves to leave the cave. Looking back, he thinks to himself, He was right about one thing. That high voltage almost succeeded in its task. Despite all precautions, Death's fingers can still touch Manhunter. That Manhunter reaches up with his gloved hands and takes off his mask. He is revealed in panel 4 to be, well, helpfully he says here, The Grim Reaper pursues me too, for I've grown old. And we see, rather than maybe perhaps the youthful hero we were expecting, we see white eyebrows and a lined old face who gets a close-up and thinks, My next case could well be my last. I've travelled too far and fought too hard. But the work must go on. Final panel of page 8, he has left the cave. You can see a grill that's fallen into place, blocking access. He's walking down a beach towards a helicopter. We can see in the distance the sea is breaking in front of him. Manhunter continues to think to himself, If justice fails, civilization fails.
Meanwhile, in a quiet suburb of a small college town...
In a very fancy apartment, you can see a hand is holding a copy of the Daily Herald newspaper. A headline reads, Little Fish Won't Talk. May choose jail in preference to mob reprisal. The newspaper continues, Public Defender cannot save Joe Burke. The newspaper is being held by someone who we don't see when he speaks and says,
I feel frustrated, Uncle. I can't gain justice for this poor fool.
And Uncle is an older-looking, bald gentleman. Looks a little bit like Warren Mitchell in these panels, to be honest.
Yeah.
Alf Garnett, if you don't understand that reference. And that probably doesn't help, to be honest. For many of our American listeners, I can only apologise. Uncle wears a purple dressing gown, neat moustache, round glasses, has a cigarette in a holder, stuff in his mouth, and he replies, It's not your fault. You can't help this man if he won't let you.
I'm a fine defender of the weak and powerless. Mark Shaw, public failure.
With that, Mark Shaw, for it is he who's holding the newspaper, thrusts the newspaper into what looks like a waste paper basket as Uncle sits down and says, You've done your best for dozens of people.
You don't understand, Uncle. As public defender, I'm assigned clients who can't afford a lawyer.
I know that.
They're little people. Many of them are victims of their own ignorance. Some of them are pawns of those too powerful to trap.
Like this Joe Burke. Burke is not the most savoury of characters. A stiff sentence may do him some good.
That's not the way to judge Burke. He's not guilty of these charges. The facts indicate that Burke is taking a fall to cover for someone with power. He's a patsy who won't defend himself. He fears this power.
It's an old jungle law. The big fish eat the little fish.
I'll never accept that. My job is to eliminate the jungle law. If the big fish are guilty, they must face the bar of justice.
We get a proper good look at Mark Shaw. Very handsome looking young man, very sensible blue suit, smart shirt and tie, neat brown haired and a side parting. Who could have played him, do you think, at this point in 1975?
At this point, Robert Wagner.
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah.
Perfect. We also get a better look at his apartment here. We can see a weird statue and some wall panelling. It's all very 70s Kirby. Some of this will make it onto the socials. But anyway, Mark continues, saying to Uncle,
Justice for every man and woman. I've dedicated my life to it. I'd like to see it work as it should.
Fine words, young man, but there's a way to test it. Now, that Uncle has opened a hatch in the wall and pressed a button concealed behind this little doorway. And interestingly, that looks like the face of Ben Grimm, the Thing, on the wall above the hatch. The button has an interesting effect which, helpfully, Mark tells us about.
That secret door. It leads to your artifact collection.
Yes, and a massive big hole in the wall is opened up. Uncle and Mark looking in, we can see Kirby-style ancient artifacts. Uncle points and continues saying, Yes, I've gathered some unique objects during my years as an archaeologist. Step in. They move into the darkened room.
This is an honour, Uncle. I know you guard your treasures jealously.
That I do. I've kept many of them hidden, even from you, Mark. As they move further in, we get to see them, which looks like a sarcophagus, a couple of big, large ornamental masks, a weird statue of a horned goblin type thing, and a few items, larger items that look very ornate and fancily carved, very 70s Kirby. Maybe we'll put this panel on, but if you've ever read a 70s Jack Kirby story, you can probably imagine what a lot of this looks like. As they move through the room, Mark says,
Is there something here that relates to our discussion?
It relates to justice. You'll learn that you're not the first with a zeal to serve justice. We're continued on the 5th page following. We pass a full page advertisement, split down the middle for medieval knights and armour toys and some Civil War soldiers. We pass... Oh, is that a subscription ad for The Amazing World of DC Comics? It is! With Cain and Abel and Swamp Thing, we pass the full page advertisement that highlighted what DC was doing in 75 that I've shared on socials before now, but it's one that features Claw the Unconquered and Stalker and Justice Inc. and the Phantom Stranger and Shazam and Deadman and Green Lantern. And we pass an advertisement for the Black Dragon Fighting Society, so Peter will tell us how he got on with Count Dante when he met when he was a little boy later on. So we're now at the top of page 11 of the story. Further into the room, Uncle and Mark have reached a glass cabinet, which has a very familiar uniform stretched out inside it. Following up what you were saying about Mark not being the first to pursue justice, Uncle is saying, Nobody knows when the Shan was organised, but it's a very old sect. The original members were warriors who fought the barbaric injustices of the warlords. Mark looks closer. To us is a very familiar looking outfit, and he remarks,
That mask, it's so lifelike.
Masks such as this one are worn to this day. They call it the face of Manhunter.
What? You mean the Shan are still alive?
I think they are. I think that a Shan Manhunter has solved some very recent crimes. The Shan are incorruptible and take vows of lifelong dedication. When a Manhunter tracks an elusive quarry, he never fails to bring him in.
I'll bet the Shan could get at that evidence that would help my clients.
You can top that. You can be one of the Shan.
But that's incredible. I didn't imagine one could contact a legend.
Uncle has reached into the glass cabinet now because there was a little box with a star detail and some zigzag red lines along the side of it lying next to the mask of the Manhunter. And Uncle has opened up this little box to reveal a large gold coin which he holds up as he says, Their lion medallion is real. If you speak the truth to it, it is said that it shall answer.
The Shan are real. The mystic medallion can communicate, and fate is about to create a new warrior.
Yes, we are into chapter 3 of this saga, and we're back with the older Manhunter who we saw at the start of the story. He's standing in a large, ornate chamber in front of a man who looks very much like Kirby's Odin.
Very much so.
Blue leggings, a large purple cape, golden helmet with lots of detailing. He's standing at the top of a flight of stairs in front of Manhunter. There's carved lions on either side of him, shields on the wall all around, burning brazier, very shiny floor. Manhunter, with his mask in his hand, has his head bowed in front of this new arrival, and he says, Grandmaster, I ask an audience.
Speak, Manhunter.
Look at me, sire. I am old. I fear my days as Manhunter are numbered.
I know. You speak the truth.
I am the last of the warriors. My death could mean the end of our sect.
If fate wills it, but fate has always been our friend.
Continued in third page following, we pass an advertisement for the tabloid reprint of Flash Comics #1 and for that Batman tabloid that DC issued a facsimile of just a couple of weeks ago.
Yay!
Available in Forbidden Planet, Sauchiehall Street and other good comic shops. The first panel of page 13, Manhunter bows before the Grandmaster as the Grandmaster says,
A new warrior will arise. He will call in this time of need.
Our work shall not die.
Stand fast, trust, and wait.
My faith never wavers, sire. The Grandmaster then gestures towards a huge monolith, shining gold, which has the detail of a lion, as he says,
Behold, the great lion, symbol of the Shah's courage. It speaks when the time is right.
Will we hear the voice of a new warrior?
The lion suddenly speaks.
Yes, indeed. From the lion's open mouth, we hear someone saying,
Hello, my name is Mark Shaw.
He comes! Fate is kind! There's a slow dissolve. A caption reads,
Days later, at the home of Mark Shaw's uncle.
Mark Shaw's uncle walks in, exclaims, What? Because he sees that Mark is wearing a very familiar red and blue outfit. Mark says,
Come in, sir. Things have changed here.
Bradford Shaw is astounded by the appearance of his nephew.
Uncle Bradford, there we go. Mark, it worked! When you talked into the Mystic Medallion, the Shan responded.
This costume and mask arrived today.
Says Mark, removing the mask so that we can see his own face underneath. He holds up a box, a blue sort of onyx-looking box with a red emblem on it, which is the gold lion at the heart of it. Mark continues,
The person I spoke to, the man known as Grandmaster, he sent this.
Then you've been chosen as a candidate for Manhunter.
There's something about this costume. It seems to add power to the body.
To my eyes, Uncle Bradford looks a bit shifty in that panel as we see Mark's silhouette. But then, of course, the captioning notices that too, as it says,
Then Mark notices his uncle's silence.
Anything wrong, Uncle?
Your client, Joe Burke, he's been murdered.
What? Are you sure?
There was a news bulletin. The police suspect it was a gangland execution. Joe Burke is now beyond help.
I had him released in my custody. I thought I'd hidden him from harm. His enemies found him, and I'm responsible.
With that, Mark fixes the mask back onto his helmet.
Suddenly,
Mark and Uncle Bradford whirl as some intruders have burst into the room. We see a close-up shot of a gun being held as a voice says, We'll take your worries away right now, clown. Whatever Joe Burke told you is going to die with you.
One side, Uncle,
says Mark in his Manhunter gear, putting a hand to protect his uncle. And in panel 2, we get a proper look at the new arrivals. There's one lad in an orange jacket wearing a purple cap and green glasses. There's one guy with a big wide-brimmed hat and a moustache and a wide-open shirt beside him. And there's another guy who looks kind of grumpy, wearing shades and his curly blonde hair, a cigarette in his mouth, wearing a white polo neck and a brown blouse jacket and green jeans. And the guy in the purple cap and the orange jacket says,
Sure is a shame to spoil that classy suit, lawyer.
His mate with the blonde hair says, Stop flapping! Kill them both!
then...
They both fire. There's a wham and a blam as Mark shoves Bradford to the ground, saying,
Hit the deck, Uncle.
There's a massive pow sound effect as Mark punches out the goon in the purple cap and the orange jacket. And then there's another sound effect as he goes flying through a door. Amazing. This is good because it means I can do one of my Sound Effect City New Jersey tweets this week. This is fun. In the first panel of page 16, Manhunter reaches forward, pulling the shades off the guy with the blonde hair and the brown jacket, saying,
You've bitten off more than you can chew, Hitman.
Take it easy. I didn't know you're a tiger.
The word is lion. The hunting lion.
With that, Manhunter grabs him by the scruff of his pants and scruff of his jacket, lifts him off the ground as Uncle Bradford observes, There may be more killers outside. In panel 3, Manhunter has crossed to the open window of the apartment and he's lifting the blonde hitman above his head as he says,
If you're waiting for him, here he is.
We see down on the ground a couple more bad guys, and there's also a getaway car, and you can see a very lugubrious fellow behind the wheel, and he says,
We got trouble. Let's split.
The remaining killers turn tail and flee in their car.
The car speeds off. We see it rolling through a nice country scene. From inside, a voice says,
What do we tell the chief?
Shut up. Keep driving.
Meanwhile...
Manhunter, Mark Shaw, is holding that guy out the window. He's saying,
Someone sent you here, Hitman. Who sent you here?
I can't.
Give me his name, or I'll drop you from this window.
It was Al Beefer, the hog. First panel of page 17, Mark the Manhunter brings the bad guy in from the window as Uncle picks up one of the other bad guy's weapons and says, Mark, I've trussed up the other two and taken their guns.
That's fine. Here's another.
As they drop into the floor, Uncle starts tying up his wrists, saying, This isn't the end of it, you know. They'll still try to silence us.
There's only one answer. To make them talk.
What are you going to do? Says Uncle, weirdly pointing a gun straight at Mark in panel 3. Mark replies,
"What Manhunter was meant to do. Serve the cause of justice. I'm going after Albie for the Hog and his organization."
"Be careful, Mark. It's a mighty big target. Good luck."
Then Manhunter takes the quickest exit to begin his pursuit.
Yeah. Mark Shaw Manhunter leaps from the window to the tree outside, saying as he goes,
"Turn those thugs over to the police. Goodbye, Uncle."
There's a quick dissolve at the top of page 18.
Meanwhile, in the headquarters of the Shan...
Yep, we're back with the Grandmaster and the older Manhunter. The Manhunter says, "Our candidate is off to his first test, Grandmaster."
He is swift. He moves well. He was down from that tree in seconds.
Yes, we can see that Grandmaster and the elderly Manhunter are watching Mark on a video screen. Manhunter continues, "My hopes are raised, sire. When he earns his baton, I shall be free of my duty."
We shall follow his progress closely. I'll activate the mystic sensors. 1,000 years of study has enabled us to follow the quarry as well.
And with that, we see the Grandmaster activating yet another piece of gorgeous, magnificently detailed Kirby tech, a burst of energy, but then there's another final slow dissolve.
The next image that appears reflects the ruthless face of evil, growing powerful and cunning in its continued forays against society. It's the face of Manhunter's target.
And we see the Hog, who is a grotesquely featured Kirby creation. Short dark hair, crew cut, wide mouth, thick lips, hooded eyes, a very blunt nose. He has fancy ornate rings in his right hand as he smokes a cigarette in a holder. Standing behind him is a neat moustached gentleman who's just sliding his hand into his jacket, presumably for his pistol in case he has to protect his boss. This indeed seems to be the Hog. And then we have another caption which rounds things out.
Want to see the clash between Manhunter and the Hog? If so, write and tell us. The address is Manhunter, P.O. Box 336, Newbury Park, California, 91320. Next first issue special on sale 4th week in June.
That's a weird address because DC were still in New York at that point, weren't they?
Yes. Maybe that's Jack's contact details.
Wow, that's a thought.
Jack Kirby's contact details. It may well be.
Now, the issue is rounded out with a full text page which reads Manhunter the Justice Principle, which is a missive from Jack Kirby himself. And it's basically Jack sort of laying out his ideas about democracy and freedom and justice and his plans for the hopefully forthcoming Manhunter series. We will put this on the socials at some point during the week so you can read it. It'll be on Facebook, it'll be in a tweet, we'll post it on Instagram and share it in the story and all that sort of stuff. So look forward to that in a couple of days. Interestingly, Jack's missive is signed off. All gripes and kudos will be accepted at my tattered post office, P.O. Box number 336, Newbury Park, California. So I think Peter's assertion was correct. Listeners, did you ever write to Jack Kirby in California? Well then, that was an awful lot to take in, wasn't it?
That was fantastic.
It was.
It was so much fun. I loved the bait and switch of having the old Manhunter at the start. It takes off his mask. It's like, oh, who is it? Instantly, who is this? Who is this? Because we don't know what Earth this is taking place on. It could be Earth 1 or Earth 2 or its own Earth.
My first instinct in finishing it, and I have to say, as we said in preparation, reading this now is slightly confusing because there was a DC event in the 80s called Millennium, which tied all of the different Manhunter storylines and continuity together. I remember reading the issue of Secret Origins that dealt with it all, which had Roy blending it all seamlessly. It did it did work very well.
It worked rather well,
yeah. Into one sort of narrative. So it's weird reading this with the residual memory of that in my head.
Yeah.
My instinct here is that the elderly Manhunter, well, it's the original Paul Kirk who was in the Walt Simonson series that we covered earlier in the year. And of course, as you said in the prep, all these clones are introduced as well, and we'll come back to that in the future. So I don't think this can be Paul Kirk.
Could it then be Rick Nelson, who was the Manhunter in
many ways we have the same mind.
Yes, in Adventure Comics 73, the first appearance of this costume of the Manhunter, because obviously there was a Paul Kirk Manhunter series where it was plainclothes Paul Kirk, who may or may not have been a different character.
Yep.
Before that.
Manhunters are confusing, listeners.
We love Manhunters.
You think unit dating is bad?
Seriously, listeners, you should go back and listen to our Manhunters episode and also the Manhunter by Goodwin and Simonson episode as a little addition to this one, because we are loving the Manhunter legacy and we're going to dive into it as much as we possibly can. But as ever on the Earth 2 podcast, we're taking these stories pretty much in order. We might allude to some stuff that's happening in the future, but we're reacting to it as if we're reading it at the time.
Yes, the unfolding text, if you will. It's interesting. It's an idea is it could be Rick Nelson. I mean, I'm going to have to dig out this issue of Secret Origins with all the Manhunters and see how Roy tied it up, because I can't remember.
I'm sure Rick Nelson was never mentioned other than the very first appearance. And he was renamed as Paul Kirk in the reprint as well.
Of course. Listeners, I'm planning a Millennium Crossover Covers Gallery at some point. Probably not with this issue, maybe in the future, because there are some Manhunter stories in Justice League of America that we're going to do before too long that obviously kind of ties some of this stuff in. Which I mean, this could be... I can't really see how this fits into any of the continuity of the other Manhunters that we've talked about so far. It's the same sort of costume with the red and the blue. But this doesn't really fit in with the Council, does it?
No, the ones from the Goodwin and Simonson run, no. So
this, in a way, feels that maybe Jack's just doing something completely new, like he did with the Sandman, just using the bare bones of what existed before and trying to do something new with it. So it will be interesting to see if any of the Justice League stories, and don't tell us, listeners, because we haven't read them yet. We have read them in the past, but we haven't read them immediately because we tend not to read too far ahead so that we're getting the benefit of everything as it comes to us.
Yes.
Those stories may come back to us, but we'll read them in time. So please don't jump into our mentions and tell us what we should know, because we'll get to it eventually. Do I sound a bit narky? Yes, I do. I do not apologise. To me, this feels like a very clean, new version using elements from the past.
Yeah, this Manhunter does have the look of the Golden Age one, but Jack's added a lot more touches to the costume. There's a lot more detailing in the costume, which makes me think perhaps this is the Earth 1 version of Manhunter, and the one that existed in the Golden Age was an Earth 2 version.
Well,
perhaps.
The thing is, though, the Detective Comics story explicitly featured Paul Kirk.
Doesn't mean to say there can't be two.
I think in that case, then, because he met the contemporary Batman, the one that's in Detective Comics would be an Earth 1.
Definitely.
And this, in this first issue special, could be the Earth 2 legacy. I think that makes more sense, given that Paul Kirk, we sort of established that Paul Kirk was on Earth 1 when we did the Detective Comics story.
There could be an Earth 1 and Earth 2 Paul Kirk.
I know. I mean, possibly, yes. This is the thing that nobody was thinking about at the time.
Exactly. Isn't it? And this is half the fun.
And this is what you and I have to try and make sense of. Yeah, it's a difficult one. We'll have to see what happens in future and see if any of the stories we get to in the future give us any more insight into this. But to me, this seems like it could be out with continuity altogether, as very much as the Sandman seemed to be, because the Sandman stories have obviously been another one of them, probably very soon after Christmas. They haven't really hinted at anything Wesley Dodds wise at all. So I mean, this one, it's using the imagery and the iconography, and as you say, it's a much more detailed suit. There's a sort of metallic sort of look to it. It doesn't just look like it's a red and blue body stocking. Yeah. To answer, is this guy Earth 1 or Earth 2? I just don't know. I really just don't know. I have to tell you that I really just don't know. I'm afraid I have to tell you I really just don't know.
There are no hints in the story as to where this takes place, because the location where Mark Shaw lives is only referred to as a small college town.
Yes.
There's no mention of...
Is it Ivy Town?
Oh, there you go. There's no mention of any cities, so we don't know if it's going to be Central City, Keystone City, New York.
Yeah.
So there's none of that. Also, there's no other mention of any other heroes or characters out with this story.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I think it's clear to say at this point in 1975, only 10 years before the crisis, let's mention that.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like anyone at DC HQ is worrying too much about such things.
No. It's basically, here's Jack. Like he's reviving one of his old properties. Excellent. Yes. And just let him do what he wants to do.
That seems to be the priority.
Yeah.
We know that there's going to be some more stories that maybe kind of slightly follow on from this, but we'll get to them eventually.
Yeah.
Let's before we go mad with any more of that discussion, let's just talk about the merits of this one. Very fluid, very exciting, ideas by the pound on every page. It was got all those floating head masks at the start, and who was the Chopper? Was he called the Chopper just because he had that axe?
He had the axe, for example. That's very Kirby.
So why was he inside that little glass cabinet thing? Bizarre.
The mask thing was actually called back to kind of in the 1988 Manhunter series.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because his first opponent was a guy called Dumas, who collected masks.
I remember a cover which has, because you see Dr. Midnight's mask and a couple of Vigilante's mask and a couple of others.
So I bet anything that was inspired by this story.
Interesting.
That would certainly make sense.
I think that's fair. I haven't read that series. So
maybe
you and Steve should have done this episode.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Hey ho. Right, I'll just delete this and get Steve on the phone.
Get Steve on the phone, do it again. Yeah, and I say it's interesting that the cover's alluded to in the Post-Zero series as well.
And it's interesting they used the cover as a splash page, but mirrored.
I know.
That's insane.
It is. But yes, it's all very dynamic, very fluid, as in such a way that Jack's 70s stuff really is. It's not a difficult read. I hope we did it justice with our telling. I mean, if you're reading it, you would rattle through it in a few minutes, I think, because it's all big panels.
He uses a 6-panel grid a lot in this. Splash pages and 6-panel grids.
Yeah.
Sometimes a double panel, but it's still mostly the format.
Yes.
It's a really interesting storytelling way. You know, obviously people talk about Ditko and the 9-panel grid, but Jack's 6-panel grids are great, and he's also got the classic Jack page 2 and 3 double page spread, which is glorious. We need to talk about the start of chapter 3.
Fate is about to create a new warrior.
Is it Night Thrasher? Or perhaps Speedball?
Or Firestar. That's funny. That didn't occur to me. That's funny.
No, I thought it was hilarious.
That's yep, I see what you've done there. It's a brilliant origin story.
Yeah, it teases so much.
It gives us enough of a hint about what's going on before. It gives enough of a hint of what the format of the series could be. Maybe these other guys are going to advise him remotely. Is Mark going to meet the old Manhunter? Will we get a bit more history of the old Manhunter? Will the old Manhunter die at some point? You know, It's an interesting sort of origin that it very consciously seems to be passing the torch on from a previous incumbent to a new guy, which I don't really think any of the other stories in first issue special do.
Not that I can think of, no. But there's still no actual contact between them.
Yeah.
It's almost like Obi-Wan and Luke, except if they'd never met.
Yeah, it's very interesting. First issue special, not every concept that's piloted, I think, would have worked well as a series. You know, we talked last week, obviously, about Lady Cop. Lady Cop would have been phenomenal. It probably would have lasted 4 issues, but it would have been terrific. I enjoyed this issue 1 just as much as I enjoyed issue 1 of the Sandman. I would have quite happily read another 6 issues of Jack being all 70s Jack Kirby doing this version of the Manhunter and everything that would have come with it. Jumping ahead, we know that Warlord is successful enough to get a very long running book. The New Gods being showcased at the end leads to them getting a revival of their series. Dr. Fate doesn't get a new series launched out of it, etc., etc. Metamorpho doesn't get a new series launched out of it.
Some backups for some of them, but that's the extent of it, and Creeper as well, We
all know what happens to the Blue Star Man, but we'll talk about that when we get to the issue. It's an interesting mix throughout the whole series, and this is definitely one of the ones I would have liked to have read more of. I think definitely more so than, you know, the Green Team or the Dingbats of Danger Street,
Okay. Interesting.
Well, how do you feel? I mean, would you have rather read some more Manhunter than any of the others? Does this intrigue you more than some of the other concepts?
I love the Manhunter Legacy concept because, as I said, I think there's genuinely more to talk about in the Manhunter Legacy than there is in the Starman Legacy, and that's saying something because it is so involved and there are so many different characters.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean exactly, because the Starman one is much more linear. I mean, it gets arguably a bit more complicated with Will Payton and stuff in the 80s, because that's a complete departure, but then David Knight pops up, etc. I think Ross's latest Opal City Confidential is a Will Payton one at the time of recording, so make sure you're checking that out, listeners.
Yes, Stop Let's Team Up, Opal City Confidential,
Of course, it was easier for James Robinson to tie all the different Starmen together than it would be for anyone at this point to try and tie all the Manhunter stuff together.
Especially all the subsequent Manhunters, and you'd probably have to mention Martian Manhunter at some point as well. If you're doing a Starman-esque kind of series.
The Manhunter from Mars, yeah.
When we do our DC comic, I'm going to pitch a Manhunter's Starman-esque series.
Okay, interesting. I mean, the thing that this is really making me realise is that I have to read the 80s series, I have to read the 90s series, I have to read the Kate Spencer series as well. I don't know if I've got a full run. I don't know if I've got a full run of that.
I've got it all in trade if you don't. So
cool. I think I'm missing 1 or 2 now, I'm not sure, I need to have a look. It's an interesting one. This is quite a rambly chat we've had about it, but it's fine. We haven't recorded for a long time, so it balances out.
The abruptness of the ending as well.
Yes.
It literally ends with a close-up of the bad guy, who, incidentally, the Hog, I don't know about you, but I'm getting a huge Kingpin vibe from him. As if Kirby was creating the Marvel character, the Kingpin, that's what he would draw.
That's an excellent observation. That's a great insight. Yeah, I can see exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Someone who thinks he's the big man, or is the big man, literally.
Yes.
Who has a reputation and an ego to match.
Thinks he's invulnerable to everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's got that attitude.
Very much so.
Look at those big rings.
Yes.
Massive jewelled rings.
Big jowly face that would cause terror, I'm sure, in the eyes of anyone who met him for the first time.
Smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see more. It's like, it's so frustrating. It's a great idea for a series, you know, let's do lots of tryouts, but the fact that really only 2 of them got books, and one of them was a revival.
Yeah.
It's maddening. It's very good. It's very enticing. It's very intriguing. I really did want to see more. And it does make me want to go and read that issue of Secret Origins again before reading the 80s Manhunter series and then the 90s Manhunter series, just to get the full context. Because I think it would do me good to read those in advance of the Justice League stories that we're going to do.
Yeah.
Because
Mark Shaw does return.
Yes. And we're not going to say, because, you know, listeners, I'm sure you know as well what's going to happen with the Manhunters and Justice League of America, where that all goes. So there's a lot still to talk about for the Manhunter legacy on the show.
So, listeners, would you have liked this story to have continued? If so, why don't you write to us and let us know? You can email us at theearth2podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on social media, because we're putting up lots of lovely bonus material for this and indeed every episode. On Facebook and Instagram, we're at the Earth2 Podcast, and on Twitter, because we're still calling it that, we're at podcast_Earth2, and it is the number 2 for all of our socials.
It certainly is. If you're feeling generous, listeners, you go to wherever it is you receive your podcasts and give us a positive review. That'd be lovely. Spread the word. Tell your pals. If you're a fan of the Manhunter concepts, spread the word. If you have a dedicated Manhunter Facebook page or want to start one, maybe you could after listening to this episode. Maybe you'll never want to read another comic again. I don't know. Yeah, just go for it. As I always say, if you're feeling generous, please go to our link tree and find the link to buy Peter a beverage as he sits in Cafe Nero in the cold, early hours of the morning, editing out all of our fluffs and mistakes and everything. Yeah, as on the socials this week then, we'll throw up the cover for this one. We'll throw up some panels. I've managed to scavenge a few pages of original art. I'll put up the homage cover, so that should be enough to keep you entertained. We're starting to wind up for the year. Very fragmented start of the year, but of course we'll be discussing all of that when we do our end of the year show in a couple of weeks' time. What's happening next week? Oh, listeners, you won't believe what's happening next week.
I can barely believe what's happening next week.
I can barely believe it. I wish I could remember who it was that shared the panel that made me decide to ask you to suggest that we do this.
On that bombshell.
What am I talking about? Well, you'll find out in 7 days.
I've been Peter.
I've been David. And you've been listening to
the Earth 2 podcast.
Transmatter cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
Mark, it worked when you talked into the mystic medallion.
Medallion.
So it is.
What a weird place to put a hyphen. Literally making it 2 words.
Medallion.
But that works as well. But
that's insane.
Medallion. Yeah.
Right, okay. Brilliant.
That medallion medallion.
That medallion medallion. That's glorious, right?
Yeah, okay.
Please put that in as a post credits. Wonderful. Okay.